The alarm went off at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before it was supposed to. Daniel Carter had been lying awake since 4. He didn't check his phone. He already knew the day's shape: a freelance call at 8, a pickup job at the Meridian Grand Hotel by 11. And somewhere between those two things, a bowl of cereal that Lily would eat 3 bites of before declaring it wrong. She was 6 years old and had strong opinions about cereal texture. He had learned not to argue. He got up quietly. The apartment was small but orderly, not in the staged way of someone trying to impress, but in the way of someone who had learned that a cluttered kitchen made mornings harder, and mornings were already hard enough. He folded the blanket on the couch he'd given Lily the bedroom after she told him she was scared of the dark in the living room. And she wasn't scared of the dark in the bedroom, which he suspected was a negotiation, rather than a fact. He hadn't pushed back on it. He made coffee. He checked the job board while the water heated. There were 3 new listings. One from a logistics company with a bad reputation for paying late. One from a tech startup that wanted a versatile systems consultant, which meant they needed someone who could fix their servers, reorganize their ops structure, and probably write half their employee handbook, all for the rate they'd pay a temp. And one from the Meridian Grand, which was short notice and paid well, and asked only for someone who understood legacy HVAC control systems and could handle guest transport logistics during a renovation. Daniel understood legacy HVAC control systems. He accepted the Meridian job. While the coffee finished brewing, he went to check on Lily. She was asleep with her arm around a stuffed rabbit named Gerald, who had been repaired twice, once with sewing thread, once with fabric glue, and who had one ear that didn't quite match the other anymore. She had not complained about this. She had said Gerald looked distinguished. He didn't wake her. He just stood in the doorway for a moment, the way parents do, counting something they can't name. He had been doing this alone for 3 years. Lily's mother, Christine, had not left badly. She had left the way weather changes gradually, and then all at once. And by the time Daniel understood what was happening, she was already somewhere else, living a different version of her life. They were not enemies. They exchanged texts about pickup schedules and pediatrician appointments. But the gap between cordial and whole was a distance Daniel had learned to live inside. He was not unhappy. That was the part people seemed to find confusing when they looked at his life from the outside. A single father in a 2-bedroom apartment in a city that moved too fast, driving other people's cars and fixing other people's systems that looked, from certain angles, like a life that hadn't worked out. But Daniel had a child who used the word distinguished about a one-eared rabbit. He had a coffee maker that worked perfectly. He had a client list that came entirely from word of mouth, which meant people trusted him. He had a small folder on his laptop, password protected, that contained correspondence from 3 different firms over the past 2 years, offers he had declined because they required relocation or 60-hour weeks, or the kind of quiet moral compromise that compounds over time until you don't recognize yourself anymore. He had said no to all of them. He had meant it. He drank his coffee at the kitchen counter, standing up, looking at nothing in particular. His phone buzzed a reminder that Lily's school had a half-day on Thursday. He moved it to the calendar. He rinsed his mug. He got dressed in the one-collared shirt that didn't look tired yet, because the Meridian Grand was a client, and clients deserved presentation. He picked up his tool bag. He left. The Meridian Grand Hotel occupied the corner of 5th and Harrow, like it had always been there, which had had 60 years of marble lobbies and rotating door policies, and the particular smell of expensive cleaning products over old carpet. It was undergoing a partial renovation on its east wing, which was why they'd needed someone who understood the old mechanical systems still running below the new floors. Daniel arrived at 10:52 a.m. He checked in at the service entrance. He always used the service entrance, not out of any complex about his station, but because it was faster and the staff there were less performative about being helpful. The facilities manager walked him through the basement overview in 8 minutes. It was a straightforward job. The HVAC controls in the East Wing were running on a 2008 system that hadn't been properly integrated with the new sensors, causing temperature irregularities on floors 3 through 5. He'd seen this before. He knew what he was looking at. He was heading toward the main lobby to retrieve a part from the van when he saw her. She was on her knees. not in a dramatic posture of collapse in the practical, resigned way of someone doing a job that required proximity to the floor. She had a bucket beside her and a cloth in one hand, and she was scrubbing the grout between the marble tiles near the east entrance, which had apparently been stained during a guest checkout. Daniel stopped. She was wearing a gray service uniform, 3 sizes too large. Her hair was pulled back. She was thin, in the way people become thin when they're not thinking about meals, and her posture, even hunched over a bucket, had something careful in it, something watchful, and she was visibly, unmistakably, pregnant. He stood there for 2 seconds longer than he should have. Then she looked up. Her eyes found his face, and went through 3 expressions in less than a second: recognition, something like shame, and then a careful neutral that was the most heartbreaking of the 3 because he knew what it cost her. "Emily," he said, "not a question." There was a summer when Daniel Carter was 11 and Emily Saunders was 10. And the world was mostly bikes and library books, and the park on Clement Street, where the water fountain never worked right. Emily had lived 3 houses down. She was the kind of quiet that adults mistook for shyness and other children understood as intensity. She was always thinking about something, always working something out, and if you were patient enough to wait, she'd eventually tell you what it was, and it was usually more interesting than whatever everyone else was talking about. She had told him once, sitting on the wall behind the library, that she was going to be a doctor, not a pediatrician or a surgeon. She'd said it like she meant the whole category, like she was going to be medicine itself. He had believed her without question. There were 4 years of school together after that, and then Daniel's family moved, and then time did what time does. It accumulated, indifferently, without keeping records of what it buried. He had not seen Emily Saunders in 16 years. She didn't stand up. That was the first thing he noticed. She stayed on her knees, not out of deference, but because standing and lowering herself again was expensive, physically, and she was conserving. "Daniel." Her voice was even, controlled. "Hey," he said, because all the other words were too large for the lobby. "I'm working," she said, gently. Not rudely, just informatively, as if she understood that he might be confused about what was happening here, and wanted to resolve the confusion efficiently. "I know," he said. "I'm working too. I'm doing the HVAC on the East Wing." She nodded. Something loosened in her shoulders, almost imperceptibly, because it wasn't charity. He wasn't there to rescue her. He was just there. And that was different. "How long have you been here?" he asked. 7 weeks. He didn't ask the other question yet. He looked at her hands instead. They were red along the knuckles, the way hands get when they've been in cleaning solution for hours at a time, over multiple days. "Are you?" he started. "I'm fine," she said. He nodded. He believed her in the way you believe someone when you know they're lying, but you also know that pushing will only collapse the thing they've built to stay upright. He had a daughter. He understood load-bearing fictions. "I'll be around today," he said. "We can talk when you have a break." She looked away. "I'm not sure I have a break." That was the moment he should have let it go. He could see it, the geometry of the situation, the way she had arranged herself inside it to survive, and how one wrong angle from him could bring the whole careful structure down in ways she couldn't afford. He let it go. For now, he went back to work. It happened 20 minutes later. Daniel was crossing the lobby with a relay component in hand, heading back to the basement when he heard the voice. "What is this?" It wasn't a question, it was an announcement. The man's name, Daniel would later learn, was Richard Harris. He was the East Wing duty manager, mid-40s, built like someone who had been athletic once, and now held that shape only in posture and attitude. His uniform was pressed, and his expression was the expression of a man who had learned to perform authority in the particular way that middle management requires, loud enough to command the people below him, precise enough to remain useful to the people above him. He was standing over Emily. She had just finished one section of grout and was moving to the next. There was a faint watermark from where she'd been working, the kind that dries clear in 10 minutes, the kind anyone who'd ever cleaned anything would recognize as temporary. "I just cleaned this lobby," Harris said. "You just made it look worse." Emily looked up. "It will dry clear." "Sir, the cleaning agent takes. I don't need a chemistry lesson. I need this lobby presentable for the 12:30 client tour. He crouched down not to look at the floor, but to look at her, to make his height advantage a fact she had to reckon with while horizontal. What exactly have you been doing for the past 2 hours? Because from what I can see, you've made everything worse. I've cleaned the full east corridor and the entrance threshold. The watermarks will what? Will impress the clients. Will make up for the fact that I have to explain why my lobby smells like industrial cleaner at noon. Several people in the lobby had stopped moving. Not overtly, no one turned and stared, but the specific quality of not looking that people perform when they're watching something they don't want to be seen watching. Emily said nothing. She absorbed it. She had learned to absorb it. Daniel realized the flatness in her expression wasn't emptiness. It was practice. Starting today, Harris said, standing back up. You're on the 6 to 2 shift. I need this done before the morning guests come down, not while they're watching. Mr. Harris, my OB appointment is at 8 on Thursdays. I can't. That's not my problem. That's your scheduling problem. He turned to leave. That was when Daniel said it. Excuse me. Harris turned back slowly, the way people do when they're calibrating whether the interruption is worth engaging with. He saw Daniel. Gray shirt. Tool bag. The generic category of service worker passing through. Can I help you? I'm not sure, Daniel said. He set his relay component down on the small table beside the elevator bank. He tilted his head slightly, the way he did when he was actually paying attention to something. What's your full name? Harris blinked. Your full name? I'd like to know it. The pause was approximately 2 seconds long. During those 2 seconds, Harris reassembled his authority. I'm Richard Harris, duty manager of the East Wing, and Daniel had already taken out his phone. He wasn't on a call. He wasn't making one. He was doing something in the screen with the unhurried precision of a man filling out paperwork that matters. His expression hadn't changed. Harris watched this for a moment. Sir, Harris said, and the shift from dismissal to sir was minute, but audible. This is a private employee matter. Of course, Daniel said. He didn't look up. Harris left. Not with the aggressive certainty he'd arrived with the slightly modified gait of someone who has decided this situation is not worth his attention, which is what people tell themselves when a situation has made them uncertain. Emily stared at Daniel. He finally looked up from his phone. Keep doing what you're doing, he said. The watermarks will dry clear. She didn't say anything. He picked up the relay component and went back to the basement. She found him at 12:15, near the service corridor exit. Or rather, she'd been directed there by the head of housekeeping, after Daniel had quietly asked the head of housekeeping whether Emily had a break scheduled, and the head of housekeeping had said yes, 15 minutes after 12, and Daniel had said thank you and gone to wait. Emily stood in the doorway for a moment before she came in. She was holding a water bottle and eating a granola bar with the methodical efficiency of someone who has very little time and understands that the body's complaints are not optional. What did you do? She asked. Nothing yet, he said. Daniel, tell me what's going on. She looked at the wall. She'd already made some decision in the time between seeing him in the lobby and arriving here. He could see it in how she held herself. She was going to tell him. She decided it wasn't worse than everything else. So she told him. His name was Marcus Webb. She'd met him 2 years ago at a conference, which sounded like a life she used to have. And it was. She'd been 2 years into a hospital administration program, working part-time, moving towards something. He was charming and certain, and had a way of making her feel like being with him was itself an accomplishment, which she recognized now as a warning sign she'd filed under something else at the time. When she found out she was pregnant, he was kind about it for approximately 3 weeks. Then he was not. She left the program. She couldn't afford it on one income, and she was too tired to fight the math. Her mother had become ill, cardiac complications, extended recovery, bills that exceeded what insurance would cover. Emily had taken the first job that would hire her without requiring the degree she hadn't finished. The Meridian Grand did not ask about her pregnancy during hiring because she hadn't been showing yet. By the time she'd been there 3 weeks, and they'd made it clear that her position was not permanent and her hours were not guaranteed, and her agreement was, technically, an ongoing service arrangement. which was a category of employment that came with no protections she could name. She was not on payroll. She was not on any official record she could find. She did not have a contract. She had been working 53-hour weeks for below the posted service rate, because Harris had told her the training rate applied for the first 90 days, which was also not in writing anywhere. She finished her granola bar. She didn't look at Daniel while she talked. She looked at the wall. When she was done, the service corridor was very quiet. Daniel said, "You don't have to be grateful to anyone here. You understand that?" She looked at him. "They've been taking from you," he said. "Every day. That's not a debt you owe them for letting you work. That's a theft you've been absorbing." She said nothing. "You're not asking for charity," he said. "You're asking for what was already yours." Emily Saunders, who had not cried in front of another person in approximately 4 months, looked at the ceiling for a long time. She did not cry, but it was close. Daniel Carter was not a man who made speeches. He had worked in 3 industries in the past decade: logistics, technology, facilities operations, and corporate compliance consulting, and the thing he had learned in all of them was that the people who made the most noise were rarely the ones who changed things. What changed things was documentation, precision, the willingness to understand a system well enough to find the specific point where pressure would do something. He sat in the basement utility room with his laptop open, the HVAC relay half installed beside him, and he worked. He had a contact at the Regional Labor Standards Division, not a friend exactly, but a professional acquaintance with whom he'd corresponded twice in the past 3 years when client compliance audits had uncovered practices that crossed lines. The contact's name was Patricia Owens, and she was thorough, and she did not appreciate having her time wasted, which meant she appreciated Daniel because he never wasted it. He wrote to Patricia Owens. He described the situation with the specificity she required, the nature of the arrangement, the gestational stage of the employee in question, the absence of written contract, the rate discrepancy, the schedule modification made under coercion that morning. He attached nothing, yet he didn't have documentary evidence yet, only testimony. But he told her that documentary evidence existed, that the hotel's internal systems would contain timestamp records, camera footage, and payroll irregularities, and that a preliminary inquiry would surface them quickly. He sent it at 12:44 p.m. He also sent a second email. This one was to a name in his contacts, listed only as VH Meridian Group. He had worked for the Meridian Group's parent company 18 months ago, a compliance restructuring project that had lasted 6 weeks and involved the kind of quiet, painstaking work that most executives never see and can't quite value until they understand what would have happened if it hadn't been done. He had not asked for recognition. He had asked only for the rate and the referral. He had gotten both. He wrote to VH 4 sentences. He described what he had observed. He noted the potential liability. He said he thought she'd want to know. He sent it at 12:46 p.m. Then he finished installing the relay component and tested the temperature calibration on floors 3 and 4. By 1 to 15, the East Wing HVAC was running within spec. He wrote up the service report in his standard format, detailed, legible, time-stamped. His phone buzzed at 1:31. Patricia Owens. Received. Initiating preliminary inquiry. If hotel has internal HR records, we'll want them. Keep me posted. His phone buzzed again at 1:47. VH, on my way, where are you? Daniel looked at this message for a moment. He typed back. Basement utility room. East Wing. He put his phone away. He packed up his tool bag. He went to wait. The hotel's internal security office was staffed by a man named Gordon Fisk, who had worked in hospitality security for 11 years, and who had the specific exhaustion of someone who had seen enough human behavior at its worst to have stopped being surprised by it, which had also, unfortunately, made him stop being surprised by it when he should be. Gordon Fisk was on the phone with his supervisor at 1:52 p.m. when the supervisor's office called on the second line. The supervisor's supervisor was asking about the East Wing housekeeping records from the past 60 days. Gordon Fisk pulled them up. What he found was not complicated. It was the kind of uncomplicated thing that happens when a system is designed to obscure rather than to hide. Because obscuring is something you do when you're cutting corners, whereas hiding implies forethought. Richard Harris had not had forethought. He had had convenience. The timestamp records showed Emily Saunders listed in the system as a contracted service provider, which was the classification that allowed the hotel to avoid payroll registration clocking in at 5:47 a.m. most days and clocking out between 7 and 8 p.m. The registered hours, in the separate ledger Harris controlled, showed 8-hour shifts. The gap was not subtle. Gordon Fisk stared at this for a while. He sent it upstairs. At 2:04 p.m., Richard Harris was called to the general manager's office. He did not know what for. He straightened his tie in the elevator. He would later describe the next 20 minutes as the worst of his professional life, which was something, given that he had once managed a hotel pool incident that had made the local news. The general manager, a composed, methodical woman named Sandra Reyes, who had been with the Meridian Group for 14 years and had survived 2 ownership changes by being the kind of person who kept records of everything, showed him what Gordon Fisk had found. Harris said the discrepancy was a software error. Sandra Reyes said the camera timestamps did not have software errors. Harris said Emily had sometimes left early. Sandra Reyes said the card readers at the service exit said otherwise. Harris said he could explain. Sandra Reyes said she would like that very much. He couldn't explain it. Not coherently. Not in a way that didn't keep arriving at the same destination, which was that he had systematically under-recorded the hours of a pregnant worker for 7 weeks, in a way that had saved him, specifically him, not the hotel, approximately $4,000 in a slush arrangement with a facilities sub-budget he partially controlled. Sandra Reyes asked Harris to wait outside. She called legal. Legal had already received a message from the Regional Labor Standards Division. At 2:31 p.m., a car pulled up to the front of the Meridian Grand. A woman stepped out. She was in her early 50s, with the posture of someone who had learned to move through rooms quickly without appearing to hurry. She wore a coat that cost more than most people's monthly rent. And she wore it without self-consciousness, the way people do when they've stopped thinking about money and started thinking about time. Her name was Victoria Hale. She was the Regional Executive Director of Meridian Hospitality Group. She had been in a budget meeting when Daniel Carter's email arrived. She had read it twice. She had excused herself from the meeting. She walked into the lobby and said to the first staff member she saw, "Where is Daniel Carter?" People who worked at the Meridian Group knew Victoria Hale's name, but not always her face. She operated at the level where strategy happened. Acquisitions, liability management, investor relations, the kind of institutional decision-making that left no fingerprints because it wasn't trying to. She did not often appear in individual properties except during openings, audits, and crises. This was a crisis. She found Daniel in the service corridor near the East Wing, tool bag packed, waiting with the patience of a man who had made peace with his own timing. "Daniel Carter," she said. "Miss Hale," he said. She studied him for a moment. She had a way of doing this that wasn't rude. It was the look of someone calibrating, rapidly, what kind of person they were dealing with. "The woman," she said. "Emily Saunders. How do you know her?" "Childhood," he said. "And you noticed this, all of it, in a single morning?" "I noticed her." The rest followed. Victoria Hale was not a sentimental woman. She had become unsentimental through a process of years that had involved learning that sentiment without action was just self-congratulation. What she responded to was precision and clarity. And Daniel Carter had both. "Walk me through what you found," she said. He did. He was concise. He did not editorialize. He named the specific infractions, the off-payroll classification, the hour discrepancy, the coerced schedule change, the absence of any written employment terms, and he named them the way a technician names the components of a failing system. Not with outrage, but with accuracy. When he finished, she asked one question. "What do you want?" He said, "Nothing from you. I want Emily to be made whole. I want the labor board to do what it exists to do. And I want to know that what Harris did here wasn't systemic, because if it was, it's not just her." Victoria Hale was quiet for 4 seconds. That last part, she said. That's the thing I'm already worried about. Then I'd start with the service contractor classifications, he said. That's where the most exposure is. She nodded once. Come with me, she said. I'd like you in the room. It happened in the lobby at 3:15 p.m. Victoria Hale did not do it the way Harris had done things loudly, with an audience gathered by the scent of power being exercised. She did not perform, but neither did she move the conversation somewhere private. What had happened to Emily Saunders had happened in a public space, in front of witnesses who had looked carefully at the floor. It seemed appropriate that its correction happened somewhere similarly visible. Harris had been brought from the general manager's office. He stood in the center of the lobby with the careful stillness of someone who has been told nothing specific and is trying to read the room. Sandra Reyes stood to one side. Legal was on speakerphone in Sandra's jacket pocket. Daniel stood near the elevator bank, slightly apart. He had his hands in his pockets. His tool bag was on the floor beside him. Emily was there because Victoria Hale had asked for her to be there, not to be used as a prop, but because what was about to be said was about her, and she had a right to hear it. She stood near the far wall. She was very still. Victoria Hale placed 3 documents on the surface of the concierge desk. She didn't raise her voice. She said, "Mr. Harris, I'm going to describe what these documents contain, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to speak. The first is the timestamp record from the East Wing service system for the past 60 days, cross-referenced with the clock-out log from the service exit. The second is the payroll subledger for the East Wing facilities budget, which shows a discrepancy of approximately $4,000 in a 7-week period. The third is the employment classification record for Miss Emily Saunders, which categorizes her as a contracted service provider in a manner that we believe does not reflect the actual nature of her work arrangement." Harris looked at the documents. He did not reach for them. These together, Victoria Hale continued, represent a series of violations of the Fair Labor Standards Act and of the state's Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, which I suspect you are aware of because you specifically cited scheduling concerns this morning in front of witnesses. Harris opened his mouth, closed it. The lobby was extremely quiet. A guest near the elevator bank had stopped pressing the button. 2 front desk staff had stopped typing. "I want to be accurate," Harris said finally. "The contractor classification was established before you modified her hours without her consent, added shifts she couldn't work without compromising medical care, and declined to register her as an employee despite her working hours, schedule regularity, and operational dependency that clearly exceed the threshold for contractor classification." Victoria Hale's tone had not changed. It was not unkind. It was simply exact. Harris looked at Daniel. Daniel was looking at his phone, not in an aggressive way, not performing distraction. He was reviewing something on the screen with the quiet focus of someone who is simply making sure the paperwork is in order, which it was. "We'll be conducting a full audit of all contractor classifications across the East Wing," Victoria Hale said. "HR will be in touch with you regarding your employment status pending the outcome of that audit. Sandra, please arrange for Mr. Harris to work from the administrative annex until further notice." Harris said nothing more. He walked toward the elevator. The room remained quiet for a moment after he was gone, the kind of quiet that isn't empty but full. The way silence gets when something that should have been said a long time ago has finally been said. Emily was looking at the floor. Daniel noticed that her hands were not shaking anymore. Victoria Hale asked to speak with Emily privately. Daniel offered to leave. Emily asked him to stay. They sat in the hotel's small business lounge, 3 chairs, a low table, afternoon light through frosted glass. Victoria Hale had ordered water for all of them, which arrived promptly and which nobody touched. "I want to apologize to you directly," Victoria Hale said to Emily. "Not on behalf of the company as a legal position. Personally, what happened to you here was wrong. It was specifically and preventably wrong, and I am sorry that it happened in a property that carries my name." Emily said, "Thank you. That was all." She said it simply, the way people say things they mean, without needing to amplify them. "I'd like to make an offer," Victoria Hale said. "We want to retroactively register you as a permanent part-time employee from your first day, adjust your pay to the correct hourly rate, and provide back pay for the hours worked off the record. You'll also have access to the full benefits package, which includes the hotel's prenatal and parental leave provisions." Emily was quiet for a moment. "What about the OB appointments?" she said. "Your schedule will be adjusted to accommodate them. That's not negotiable, that's a baseline." Emily nodded slowly. She was working through something internally, the way she had always done, quietly, without performance, arriving somewhere carefully. "I don't want to be kept on because this is an embarrassing situation for the company," she said. "I want to be kept on if I'm good at the work." Victoria Hale looked at her. "Sandra tells me your cleaning reports are among the most thorough she's seen. You log everything. You flag problems before they become complaints." "I've always noticed things," Emily said. "I know," said Daniel quietly. He was looking at the table. Emily looked at him. Something moved across her face, too complex and too private to name. "There's one more thing," Daniel said. Victoria Hale waited. "The contractor classification problem isn't just Emily. If you run the audit with the same framework used here, hours worked, schedule regularity, operational dependency, you're going to find other people in the same position, probably throughout the East Wing, maybe beyond it. People who have been paying for their own supplies, absorbing scheduling changes, working unregistered overtime." He paused. Emily would have kept absorbing it. That's what people do when they don't have options. It doesn't mean they shouldn't have had options. The room was quiet. "I know," Victoria Hale said. "The audit needs to be real," he said. "Not a compliance checkbox. Actually real. I understand what you're asking." "I'm not asking for me," he said. "I know that too," she said. Emily was looking at Daniel with an expression he didn't see because he was looking at Victoria Hale, which was perhaps why she let herself look at him that way, because he wasn't going to use it. 3 weeks later, on a Wednesday afternoon, Daniel Carter parked his car outside the Meridian Grand and went inside. He was not on a job. Lily was beside him, wearing a jacket with a hood shaped like a bear's head, which she had selected herself and which she wore with complete conviction. The lobby had been partially rearranged, the renovation was progressing, and the temporary scaffolding near the east entrance had been cleared, which made the space feel larger. The smell of cleaning solution was still present, but lighter, mixed now with something floral from new arrangements near the front desk. A woman at the front desk recognized Daniel and gave a small nod. He asked if Emily was on shift. She was. They found her in the east corridor, not scrubbing grout, but supervising 2 newer housekeeping staff were working under her direction, and she was pointing out something along the window seam that would need attention before the next guest rotation. She had a clipboard. She had the manner of someone who had been given a task that matched their actual capabilities. She turned and saw them. Lily looked at Emily's stomach with the frank curiosity of a 6-year-old, and then looked at her face, and then said, "You're going to have a baby." "I am," Emily said. "What's its name?" "I don't know yet." Lily considered this seriously. "Gerald is a good name," she offered. "For distinguished people." Emily blinked. "That's a very specific recommendation." "It's a specific name," Lily agreed. Emily laughed. It was sudden and unguarded, and it transformed her face completely. For a moment, she looked like the girl on the library wall who had said she was going to be medicine itself, who had believed it without qualification, who had not yet learned the particular arithmetic of how life discounts you. Lily was already holding out a small paper bag, which she extended toward Emily with both hands. In the manner of someone presenting something important, Emily took it and opened it. Inside was a small crocheted elephant, pale yellow, slightly lopsided, clearly handmade. "My dad made it," Lily said. "He's not great at crochet, but he tries." Emily looked at Daniel. He had the careful, composed expression of a man who had been betrayed by his daughter and was bearing it with dignity. "She wasn't supposed to say that," he said. "It's sweet," Emily said. Her voice had changed lower, quieter. "The ears are different sizes," Daniel said. It looks distinguished, Emily said. Lily beamed. They stood there in the east corridor, the single father who carried everything lightly, the childhood friend who had learned to absorb too much, and the 6-year-old who believed that the right name could matter more than anyone expected, and for a moment, none of them said anything. The afternoon light came through the corridor windows in long angles. Somewhere on the floors above, a thermostat adjusted. The temperature held exactly where it was supposed to be. Emily held the lopsided elephant with both hands. Daniel watched her and said nothing. He had not done this for thanks. He had not done it for recognition. He had done it because he had been 11 years old, and she had been 10. And she had sat on a wall behind a library and told him what she was going to be, and she had said it with the kind of certainty that you only have once before the world teaches you to reduce your claims. He had believed her then. He still did. After a moment he said, "We should let you get back." Emily nodded. She looked down at the elephant. "Thank you," she said. "Both of you." Lily gave a formal nod, accepting this graciously. Daniel picked up his daughter and put her on his shoulders, where she rode with the calm authority of someone who had earned the altitude. He raised one hand in a small wave, not a goodbye, exactly, more an acknowledgement, the kind of gesture that doesn't require a response, because it isn't asking for one. He walked back toward the lobby. Emily watched them go. The crocheted elephant was still in her hands. Its ears were, in fact, different sizes. She turned it over once and looked at the careful, slightly imperfect stitching, the work of someone who didn't know how to do this particular thing very well but had done it anyway, with patience, because it seemed worth doing. She had not been fixed. She had not been saved. She had been seen, which was different and older, and in some ways harder to give. She set the elephant carefully in the pocket of her uniform. She turned back to the window seam. She pointed out the area that needed attention. She went back to work.